a hound on a leash, and now I was suddenly set free. I never reckoned the cost. I worked with ardour feverishly, and in the space of 14 months, the 18 oval-sized figures were finished. At first I was somewhat held back by the admonitions of the architects, who, although they had given me a big commission, yet felt that I might do something rash. I already had a reputation for wildness. Why, I don't know. It's quite possible my appearance at this time was that of the traditional anarchist. And that's it, there it is in his own writing.
Excellent.
Traditional anarchist. Wow. What else does he say? However, later, gathering strength as the architects gathered faith, I managed to impose my own ideas upon the decoration, and had only one bad halt when they totally rejected one of the figures and would not have it included. I considered it one of the best. Oh, that's sad. However, I went on, not anticipating any other kind of trouble. All was quiet until after the scaffolding was removed from the first 4 figures, and then a storm of vituperation burst out suddenly in the Evening Standard and St James' Gazette that was totally unexpected and unprecedented in its fury.
Seems to be quite common as well. So much of his work was met with that kind of reaction.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that all the time Richard Cork was saying things got daubed with paint, things were tarred and feathered. It's quite extraordinary. But yeah, it's all there in his own words.
We're now going to see a mercifully intact example of Epstein at his best. It is, in fact, I think I talked about it a bit this morning, the last carving that Epstein ever did. And what a way to go, because he really managed to develop this theme that obsessed him, the theme of the maternal figure in conjunction with somebody who's either dead or dying, who may be a son, maybe not. But in this case, it was commissioned by the Trades Union Congress for their new headquarters in Great Russell Street, which is very near the British Museum. A major building of its period, as we will discover, and we will go inside and see how this carving by Epstein, he was in quite a bad way actually when he did it, because his health was not only failing, but on a personal level his family had undergone terrible tragedy. He'd lost both a son and a daughter in the 1950s. It was a very, very tragic time for him. So he actually had to sort of soldier on. When you see the size of this carving in the TUC headquarters, you will be astonished. It is truly monumental, much more so than anything we've seen so far. But it's very interesting actually to compare it with one we've just seen at 55 Broadway. In other words, the sculpture called Night, which, if you remember, has the robed woman with her arm suspended above the body of somebody who may well be sleeping in her lap, or might in fact be Christ having died on the cross.
Right.
I think we're all agreed that that was well worth seeing. Absolutely amazing. That was, as I said, the last example of Epstein as a carver. What we're now going to see is a very late example of Epstein as a modeler. Okay, this is a Madonna and Child, and it's made in lead in the early 1950s, between 1950 and 1952, and it was made for the former, no longer, the former convent of the Holy Child of Jesus in Cavendish Square, just behind Oxford Street. The site, as you will see, is very unconventional. It's a stone bridge which links 2 older buildings in a Palladian style, which were inhabited then by the convent of the Holy Child of Jesus. And the architect, who was a man called Louis Osman, O-S-M-A-N, he realized, very brilliantly in fact, that the plain supporting wall above the bridge's arch could provide a wonderful backdrop for a sculpture. And he said, he wrote afterwards, it's a very nice quote, "One cannot just apply a great work of art to a building and expect a happy marriage. If the sculpture is important, it must be given its head, like the role of a soloist in a concerto, the orchestra being like the architecture, with the solo instrument speaking its poetry, related to the architecture, but clear and independent. And Epstein certainly came up with a very memorable result. The Madonna, her face, is based on a friend of his who was a pianist. She was called Marcella Barzetti, and she looks down in the direction of her son. So often we're finding, aren't we, with Epstein, again and again, it's the maternal figure looking down towards the younger figure below. But this time she's very restrained. Epstein as a modeler, on the whole, is much more restrained than Epstein as a carver, more naturalistic in fact. And he also had to respond to the client's wishes. And the Mother Superior, we have to imagine this as a memorable meeting, I think, the Mother Superior of the convent went along to Epstein's studio. And she examined the plaster version which he made, and she asked Epstein to give the Madonna a more contemplative face. I think he did actually comply with her request, because she is very contemplative, and the pose of the child whom she is protecting is very, very ambiguous. The child stretches out his arms, and it looks as if he wants to embrace everybody. It looks like a welcoming, loving gesture. Come to me, I am the Christ child, I will look after you, I will protect you. But at the same time, as we're looking at it, of course, we are reminded of the horizontality of the arms, suggesting what is going to happen to the Christ child himself on the cross. So there is a prophecy really there of the crucifixion as well.
Okay, well, we're in the Garman Rhine collection in the New Art Gallery in Walsall, looking at Epstein's maquette for the Cavendish Square Madonna and Child, which is a very, very small maquette that Epstein presented to the nuns for approval for building the large sculpture that we've seen. And it's quite a different piece in many ways, but really the main difference is in the face, the features, where the head of the Madonna looks straight out at you. And the features are supposed to be from Kathleen, Lady Kathleen Epstein, or Kathleen Garman as she was. But when the nuns saw the maquette, they approved wholeheartedly of it, but what they actually wanted was for him to give her a little bit more humility, have the face looking down at the Christ child. Obviously Kathleen didn't have quite enough humility for the nuns, so he changed the face completely, and it's a very different face from the maquette here. I think it was incredible amount of courage that the nuns showed in commissioning Epstein to do this piece, because this was his first major public sculpture for about 30 years. So he produced the night and day sculptures for the underground headquarters. After following that, every single sculpture that Epstein made caused this awful furore, as we've heard, and people just got scared of commissioning him, basically. But 30 years later, after the Second World War, there were very few artists around that had this sort of compassion, this ability to work with religious subject matters in the way that Epstein obviously had. And he started to get more commissions again, but this one of the Cavendish Square was the first one that broke the mould. And there's a delightful story around it that I remember reading, in which when Epstein was putting the finishing touches to the sculpture in situ in Cavendish Square, a taxi driver pulled up and said, "Hey mate, it looks good, you've done well there." And Epstein finally sort of took this as approval that the general public had caught up with him and his art, and that he'd actually arrived on the popular scene at long last. So it's quite an interesting piece altogether.
First of all, a very warm welcome to you all, and particularly to those of you who have not joined us in today's tour around London, which for everybody who was on it, I think I'm right in saying it was nothing short of spectacular.
What did you feel about some of the Epstein sculptures we've seen today? They've been fantastic.
I had never seen the War Memorial before, and that I think was probably the most. I got chills when I first saw it today because I'd only seen pictures, and I never realized the power of the piece and just the whole space that it was within, and looking at the sculpture more closely and realizing the details of the body, you know, one of the shoulders sort of being off balance and one of the hips sort of being, I can't even think, you know, sort of supporting the body, and just the power of that piece, it was very moving. And then also I had never seen the piece at Cavendish Square, the Madonna and Child, so that was also really quite beautiful. I've been here before, but 30 years ago, so those two pieces in particular were very special for me. The whole day was absolutely wonderful. I think it was just a really, I'm so appreciative of this whole day happening to commemorate his life and his work.
20 years ago, I did this for the Whitechapel. My mother and I did it fairly on our own. So some of this, the tears of standing in front of his house from both of us, that isn't hitting me this time because I've already done that, been there. But this trip, I had never been to Putney before, and that was awesome. Going to Putney and seeing his grave, and I have never been in a graveyard that awesome, just huge. And I have done a lot of photography in my life, and I've gone to graveyards, lived in Charleston, and went to what they consider old graveyards, Edgar Allan Poe's graveyards there. But that was awesome. I think it was a very wonderful way to start this tour.
Is there any particular works you've seen today that maybe you've seen something new in them in a different light?
The TEC one. Because that's not easily accessible, so I haven't seen that as much as the other ones. And today, especially with Richard talking, and I looked at it again, and you know how when he's standing, when you first look at it, you think that it's out of proportion. And it isn't, it's because he's holding this figure, so one shoulder is slightly raised and a hip is brought forward to hold, taking the weight of this body. And I was so moved by that. And I hadn't seen that before. I thought it was a wonderful piece, and I thought it was beautifully presented in the past. But today I really, really saw that for the first time, and it was so emotional, so emotional.
I think what impressed me above all today was the heartfelt nature of Epstein's work. Going up to these sculptures, one after another, seeing them in the flesh, beautifully lit on this magical summer's day, it was almost as if I was seeing them for the very first time, and it made me realise quite how much they meant to Epstein, and how well he was able to convey that strength of that emotion so that we in our turn cared about them as well. And it's all to do in the end with being human. It's to do with relationships between parents and children. It's to do with love, it's to do with death, it's to do with birth. It's to do with everything. I mean, I think that the great thing about Epstein is that he encompasses so much, and he's not afraid ever to take on the really big issues that concern us all, and that's why he speaks to everybody really in the end.